Hey guys, my name is Daniel and today I'm going to be talking about ancient China in my very fine costume. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, let's get into the video. Now I'm going to be talking about the geography, like the location, the climate, the weather, and the precipitation. Alright, let's get into it. Ancient China was located on the eastern part of the continent of Asia, which is where China is today. Ancient China bordered the East China Sea, the Yellow Sea, the South China Sea. Some countries it bordered were India, Russia, Mongolia, and Korea. China is a vast country with many different weather systems. The climate in China ranged from tropical to high-altitude polar conditions. A tropical climate is found on Hainan Island. Usually there is a large amount of rainfall during the summer months. Average temperatures are 21 degrees Celsius in the winter to 38 degrees Celsius in the summer. From March to November, the weather becomes very hot and humid. In the southeast, there is usually a very hot, humid summer with maximum temperatures of 38 degrees Celsius. The winters are mild and drizzly with a minimum temperature of 10 degrees Celsius, which is still like autumn for us. The coast is often struck by typhoons between July and September. The winters in the northeast are exceptionally cold, with temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius. That's pretty cold. The summers are hot and dry, reaching a maximum temperature of 35 degrees Celsius. That is a pretty extreme range. This made it harder for them because of either the heat or cold, making it harder to thrive in almost all of ancient China. Now I'm going to be talking about the environment, like natural resources, agriculture, physical features, and food. Let's head on in. Some of the natural resources from ancient China are coal, iron, tin, lead, copper, gold, salt, clay, jade, pine, and bamboo. That's a lot of stuff. Did you know that China produces the most rice in the world? If you eat rice, then it probably comes from China. Ancient Chinese began farming rice over 9,000 years ago. Farming made life easier because people no longer had to travel to hunt animals, but could grow their food where they lived. Rice and millet were the two main crops grown in ancient China. Rice needs a lot of water, so the ancient Chinese figured out how to flood fields from rivers to make rice paddies, which are fields for growing rice, as the name suggests, obviously. Millet was another main crop grown by the ancient Chinese. Millet is a grain that was boiled to make a porridge. It was farmed in the northern region because it didn't need a lot of rain to grow, and the north has a cooler, dry climate. In the beginning, planting and harvesting was done by hand. This takes a lot of time and requires many people to farm. Later, the ancient Chinese created tools to make it easier, such as the spade and the plow. Or the plow, whatever you call it. Spade is like a small shovel with a sharp edge. They would use them to dig or to cut the stalks of millet or rice. They could plant and harvest faster with the spade. Among the other animals that are domesticated by the ancient Chinese were the water buffalo, important for pulling plows, silkworms, ducks, and geese. Wheat, barley, cows, horses, sheep, goats, and pigs were introduced to China from the Fertile Crescent in Western Asia, so later. The large land China was isolated from much of the rest of the world by the Gobi Desert and the Taklamakan, I can't pronounce that, that's my attempt, desert to the north and west, the Pacific Ocean, which includes the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Yellow Sea, and much more to the east, and pretty much impassable mountains called the Hangduang Mountains to the south. There are also two rivers called the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze or Yangtze River to the south. This made it both easier and harder for ancient Chinese people because the deserts, the ocean, and the mountains can protect China from most invaders. Not the Mongolians because they're literally in the deserts. But it would also cut off the Chinese people from most other societies for quite a long time before they did the Silk Road thingy. Leading to very little trading before they found the Silk Road. Yeah.
A few moments later.
Now we're on to daily and family life. So like roles in the family, what they did for fun, clothing, and education. Let's do this. The majority of people in ancient China were peasant farmers. Although they were respected for the food they provided for the rest of the people, they lived difficult lives. The typical farmer lived in a small village of around 100 families. They worked small family farms. Although they had plows and sometimes used animals like dogs and oxen to do the work, most of the work was done by hand. Farmers had to work for the government for about 1 month each year. They served in the military work, construction projects like building canals, palaces, and city walls, such as the Great Wall of China. Farmers also had to pay taxes by giving the government a percentage of their crops. For clothing, people in ancient China wore tunics. A woman wore long tunics and sometimes a second tunic over their first. In ancient China, some wore pants under their tunics. The men wore shorter tunics over their pants. I don't really get that, but okay. In colder weather, people wore warm, short jackets. It wasn't until the Middle Ages, about 1200 CE, that cotton was introduced by the Mongols. One emperor decided that peasants could not wear bright colors, but they did not last very long. That tradition. Later on in the Middle Ages, the government did get involved in what people could wear and how they could look. In ancient China, nobody cares what colors you were wearing as long as you did your work. Most farmers wore dark blues and grays. This is pretty dark and kind of looks like gray. If a farmer wanted to allow his wife to dye her clothes in bright colors, she could. There was a big difference between the clothes of the rich and the clothes of the poor. Poor people made clothing out of various plant fibers. Their clothing was rather stiff and scratchy until the introduction of cotton. The rich made clothing out of silk. Their clothes were soft and beautiful and richly colored. In ancient China, men ruled the households and had complete control over their wife. The only real role of the wife was to be like a helper to the husbands and produce sons for them so that the sons could carry the family name. Apart from that, men were the main workers for like farming, building, crafting, and like more jobs. And that was pretty much all of theirs, unless they wanted their wives to do instead of them, which I guess could be possible. But anyways, ancient Chinese society widely practiced the ideas of Confucius. Under Confucianism belief, everyone has their role in society and has to behave accordingly. Woman's main duty was to bear male offspring for her husband. It was reasonable for a husband to remarry if his first wife could not bear enough sons. The wives also have to obey her husband and even her son when he grows older. There were limited occupations or jobs for women. Education for women was not popular at these times and not allowed, but they could receive limited education to enable them to teach their sons. Textile industry, however, often employed numerous female workers. Women were skilled in Chinese silk weaving. Other occupants included sales in traditional markets or entertainers, so like basically dancers and stuff. Women were not often respected if they weren't married. It is extremely hard for a woman to be self-reliant in ancient China, which is pretty much a patriarchy, as we've just seen before. As for the kids in ancient China, the birth of a boy was always more important than the birth of a girl. Girls from poor families might be sold as servants to rich families if they were desperate enough. But kids in ancient China were loved. If a family had to give up a child, it was because they could not afford to feed them, not because they did not want them. Humans are humans after all. Kids lived with their parents, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, and cousins. They all lived in the exact same house. Their house had a shrine they used to worship their ancestors. Kids play with their toys, like marbles and kites. They helped their parents in fields unless they had hired help to do that for them. The parents hired help. The girls helped their mother around the house. Boys lived with the family all their lives, but girls moved to their husband's house once they married. Wives were no longer allowed to worship their own ancestors. They had to worship their husband's ancestors and be loyal to the husband's family. Marriages were arranged. For fun, ancient Chinese had many forms of entertainment, including cricket fighting, soccer, and kite flying. Art forms including calligraphy, poetry, and painting and sculptures made of terracotta were widely popular throughout Chinese history. Well, soccer is a popular sport to play and watch, but did you know that 2,500 years ago, the ancient Chinese created one of the first types of soccer games called Kuju. Well, yeah, that's what it looks like. Two teams played on the field and tried to kick a ball through a hole in the net, similar to like a bullseye. Whoever got the most balls through the net won the game. Archery, rowing, and card and board games were popular too. Maybe you've played Parcheesi, I have not, or chess. I suck at that. These games were started in ancient China. Flying kites was another fun way to pass time, and it was also a form of art. Beautiful kites were created out of paper or silk for children to fly. And what is the perfect ending to a celebration? Fireworks! Legends say that fireworks were invented in China when a cook accidentally mixed an explosive combination of ingredients and placed them in a bamboo tube which spontaneously combusted. Fireworks were used to keep evil spirits away, as well as during festivals and celebrations. Calligraphy, poetry, and painting were called the three perfections as by the ancient Chinese, and they were often used together to create a work of art. Calligraphy is a decorative type of handwriting that is an art form, often created using a brush or pen. Terracotta, pronounced terracotta, which is a hard fired clay material used to make pottery and sculptures, was used in ancient China. In 221 BC, Emperor Qin of the Qin dynasty ordered a giant tomb to be built for him. It's the largest burial site ever found, and inside were 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers to guard his afterlife thing. Yeah. Alright, now on to ancient Chinese architecture. So what did they build, how they built it, and what their homes looked like. Let's do it. Ancient Chinese architecture has its own principles of structure and layout. The ancient Chinese used timber frames and pounded earth to build homes, temples, and palaces. Different pieces of the building were supported in different ways so that no one wall supported the whole house. There's an old saying about that, in fact. Chinese houses will stand when their walls collapse. The interior of buildings of all sorts were decorated with flower designs and scrolls with peaceful things found in nature. The ancient Chinese also used a glaze to coat walls and ceilings for protection against moisture and for added beauty. So it kind of looks shiny, I'm pretty sure. The courtyard was an important part of the ancient Chinese buildings, from the most humble farmhouse to the biggest palace. The poor could not afford a big courtyard surrounded on 3 sides by the wings of the home and 4th side guarded by a gate to create an enclosed courtyard. Instead, the poor built several small houses around an open rectangular space, creating a shared courtyard. Courtyards came in different sizes, but each courtyard was laid out like a rectangular painting. It was designed to unfold visually as you moved around the courtyard. This was done using plants and pots and movable screens. I don't know. The view from any window in the house or houses or palace or temple overlooking the courtyard was uniquely different. By design, no two views were the same. The main door into the complex or home or palace or temple always had to face south. The ancient Chinese believed that the proper building materials, earth and wood, an enclosed interior courtyard, and a front door facing south all combined offer beneficial energy to those who spend time there. Now, onto the pagoda roof. A pagoda roof is shaped somewhat like a mountaintop, with peaks and levels. The ancient Chinese did not invent the pagoda roof. This roof design arrived in ancient China from the Indians via the Silk Road during the Han times. But it was an instant hit. Ancient Chinese architects went to work all over China, adding a pagoda roof to the homes of the rich. The roof was also used in the design of Buddhist temples. The ancient Chinese were very clever people. Their love of beauty and nature and their belief in conspicuous natures of certain things was reflected in their architecture, even in the most humble of homes. Not a lot of this one actually. It just came from 2 sources. Right, now on to social and political organization. So, who's in charge and stuff like that. Let's do it. Ancient Chinese society was, like all societies at the time, pretty much agricultural. The vast majority of Chinese families lived in small farming villages of a dozen or so families. keep in mind that this was pretty much when China started, so the population isn't very large. Therefore, the villages did not have 100 or so families in them yet. Over time, an increasingly elaborate society grew upon this foundation. The economy became more dynamic as trade and industry expanded, and the Silk Road existed. The government became more complex, and new social classes appeared. While continuing to be based on agriculture, Chinese civilization and society is probably the most sophisticated that world history would produce until modern industrialized nations began to appear in the 19th century Europe. Now, to the classes. According to the traditional Confucian view, society is made up of 4 classes. Well, in my opinion, it's actually 5. But if you don't consider the emperor and the slaves as classes, it's 4 or 3. But I'll still show you all 5 different classes, in my opinion. Okay, so number 1, the emperor as the first class, government officials, nobles, and the palace court as the second class, farmers and artisans as third classes, merchants as fourth class peeps, and slaves down below. This scheme regards public officials, nobles, and the palace court as like the shepherd dogs of a flock of sheep. The emperor as the owner of the shepherd dogs. So the emperor is the shepherd, and it esteems farmers and artisans as the economic basis for the whole society, like the people who buy the shepherd's wool and mutton. And recognizes merchants as being of some use, but some depict merchants as being greedy parasites on the rest of the society, making themselves rich by making others poor. Basically, the wolves of a pasture. Slaves were simply the sheep in this example. Yeah. This does express a basic truth, that ancient China was, like all ancient societies at the time, a hierarchical society, and contained different social groups with different levels of wealth and influence. The roles of these different classes, their composition, and relative position in relation to one another was always changing. This can be clearly seen when we look at the different elements. Okay, so this video is going to get really long if I include the whole thing, so I'm going to make a part 2 to this video. Yeah, so link in the description below. This video is done for now. See ya!